No matter what sport you're involved in, from gymnastics to rugby, there's going to be some rules that are definitely going to be set in stone. Those rules you definitely don't want to break. And that applies for e-mountain biking too. So today, here's our top rules you definitely don't want to break. Rule number 1, never run out of juice. Yep, we've all probably been there maybe once or twice, and it's one I definitely don't recommend doing that often. When you run out of battery miles from home, you've got some muddy climbs in front of you, it could be a long push and it could make you want to sling that brand new e-bike into the closest hedge and walk home. It's pretty key to know your route and elevation that's on your intended ride before you set off and tailor your assist modes to suit to ensure you arrive home with some left in the tank. All bikes break no matter how well they're maintained. It's not if, but when. And if you're not prepared with the right tools, you could be facing a long, long walk home. Some of the most common breakdowns when it comes to e-mountain bikes are going to be a snap chain or possibly punctures too. And in preparation for this, in your bag, you should definitely have a multi-tool, a chain tool with a quick link, an inner tube, a pump, and some form of repairing those torn tires, and maybe some puncture plugs too for some of those bigger holes. Or kit like this could definitely save your day. Oh, and one last thing, don't forget if you're carrying a spare battery, remember the means of removing it from the bike, especially if it's one of those keys. The battery on your e-mountain bike is one of the most expensive components, and it's vital that you look after it. And you can look after it in many different ways, such as when it comes to charging that bike. If you don't require the full range from your battery, you can actually get more cycles out of your battery by topping it up to around 80% instead of that full 100% charge. And where you store the battery, now this is really important too. You need the temperatures to be around 20 degrees Celsius. Quite like us, as a human, we like those temperatures. Anything too hot, they won't like it. Or if it's too cold, you could also damage your battery too. And when it comes to storage, store that battery at around 60% instead of a full 100% charge. And lastly, when it comes to charging, try and use a plug-in timer. That way it's going to cut that power out when that battery is fully topped up to 100%. That way, you're just going to make that battery have a happy life, and it's going to power you along many, many miles of trails. Yes, it can be quite tempting to remove that speed limiter from your bike and de-restrict it, and many riders do, but should you? There's lots to think about here. Now, number 1 is essentially you're going to be riding an uninsured, untaxed electric vehicle on the road. Now, would you do that in your normal motor car? Number 2 is that they're illegal even to ride off-road unless you've got private land that the public have no access to. And lastly, you're probably going to invalidate any warranty on your bike if you have some in place. And one last thing is that you're going to be compromising that trail access for all us e-mountain bikers, particularly if you're flying around those trails at 30 miles per hour on the flat. In short, it's not a good idea, but that choice is ultimately yours. It's very tempting splashing a load of cash to upgrade your e-mountain bike, but you can actually upgrade some of those components by downgrading it to something a little less expensive. And we've seen lots of people do this, particularly on their drivetrain, going from an expensive 12-speed setup to a 10-speed setup. There's going to be no performance loss whatsoever, but you're going to end up with a fatter wallet. Now, you really need to ask yourself, do you really need that rainbow lightweight cassette? When it comes to e-mountain bikes, the components are all about durability rather than saving those grams, which we do in mountain biking. Splash that cash wisely. Riding your e-mountain bike on the trails definitely has some golden rules, particularly if you're riding with standard mountain bikes. You should never be tempted to ride up a downhill track ever, as meeting a rider hurtling down the hill can cause a huge crash. When you see a mountain bike getting pushed up a hill, just give them a cheery hello. Maintain your ride. Now, it's vitally important to keep that drivetrain clean after every single ride. Make sure you clean and lube it and inspect it too. And also measure it using a chain checker just to make sure that the chain isn't worn out. Otherwise, it's going to take out your chain ring and your really expensive cassette too. Brake pads. Now, use brake cleaner on your rotors and just make sure there's enough pad material left on those brake pads to make sure they're going to work effectively. And lastly, your tyres. Now, tyres are a really important part of your e-mountain bike. If they're worn, you're not going to get any drive or grip coming from those tyres. And keep an eye on that all-important tyre pressure too. The sport we're involved in is evolving at a supersonic rate, and there's always going to be something newer out there. And all this chat about backwards compatibility, well, I can't wait to see it. The bike you've got currently is super capable. Just get out there and enjoy the ride. And if you haven't got one, buy one now. The time is never going to be more right than the present. Get out there, get on board, and have the ride of your life. So there we have it, our golden rules of e-mountain biking. Get involved in the comments box down below if we've left any out. Love to hear from you guys. And whilst you're there commenting, make sure you click subscribe too. Check out the merch shop, and we shall see you in the next one.